Hey there, and welcome back to another Miraculous Ladybug video. And today we're going to be talking about the character of Nathalie, and how the most recent episode releases opened up a whole lot of questions about her and her role going forward. Namely, is Nathalie still a villain? Or is there something else going on here? That's what I want to try to puzzle out. After all, for what seemed like much of Season 5 and now into Season 6, it seemed like her story was primed to be one of redemption. But now I'm not so sure. She's seeming a whole lot more suspicious at the moment, and I'm not sure what direction her character's going to go. I suppose that in order to really appreciate what is going on now though, we need to understand what the story arc has been so far. When the show first began and she was introduced way back in Season 1, it seems really clear in hindsight that they didn't have a 100% concrete plan for the character. She was just a generic lackey. Throughout Season 1 she's shown to be especially loyal to Gabe and his desires, and while she clearly cares about Adrien somewhat, they're not all that close. There is a professional distance that exists. Pretty sure she forgets his birthday at one point, doesn't she? You can't tell me she was always intended to be a surrogate mother figure with stuff like that in the script. She was a crony and little more than that. She exists solely to enact Gabe's will, telling Adrien what he's supposed to do and where he's supposed to go, doing the types of chores you'd normally associate with a personal assistant. She doesn't seem all that important overall, to tell you the truth. It's in Season 2 where things started to shift, as she'd become more and more involved in Gabe's plots and plans, and at the time it really did feel like as if they were having her develop romantic feelings for him, you know what I mean? So many long lingering stares and lines that felt like they had a bit of a double meaning. I never was thinking that Gabe was actually going to reciprocate these feelings or anything, but it certainly felt like they were setting her up to have a bit of a doomed love for him that could never be. Those were the vibes coming out of Season 2. At the same time though, she started to get more, cool moments I guess is how you'd phrase it. There was one scene I remember where she completely put Audrey in her place, which was fun. On top of that, she took up the Peacock Miraculous to help Gabe and became Mayura. Her role in Season 3 became way more important as a result, but it still didn't feel much beyond her being a secondary villain to help and simp for Gabe. I think it was in Season 4 that it started to feel like things were slowly shifting around. Nathalie's bond with Adrien was being fleshed out and was treated as an important part of the narrative overall. She was also dying as a result of overuse of the damaged Peacock. So there was less of the villain stuff for her to be doing as a result. That being said, she was still working for Gabe and going along with all his schemes at this point in time, and it didn't really feel like much was going to change for the status quo. It wasn't until Season 5 then rolls around that everything shifts, and the way the character was portrayed within the story overall rapidly pivoted to something completely different. Something far less pathetic and more maternal and protective. Over the course of that season, despite having a fail-safe way to get what he wants with no real way to stop him, Gabe doesn't actually use the Rabbit Miraculous to go back in time to stop Emily getting sick, and instead doubles down on trying to get his hands on the Ladybug and the Cat Miraculous for his wish instead, and also for the glory of being able to defeat those pesky heroes. This means the present doesn't change, both Emily and Colt remain dead, and Nathalie remains sick and on her way out. This proves that he doesn't really care about his son as much as he cares about revenge, that he's too far gone, and this makes her begin to change too. Her whole romance arc with Gabe is abruptly dropped, not really mentioned again at all, whilst at the same time, they really leaned into the closeness between her and Adrien and tried to spin the tale that it's always been this way. Sure it has. It's very clearly a soft retcon and reboot of their relationship, but I'm not knocking it because I do think it's the right decision. It gives Adrien some tasty angst potential since he now has this positive role model and caring maternal figure in his life. However, she's suffering with the same affliction that his mother did. I do have to wonder what Adrien was thinking at this moment. When both of them end up getting struck down by the same thing, surely Adrien would be thinking maybe there's some radioactive waste or something under the house. I would certainly be a bit concerned. And at the same time as this, Nathalie's story was rejuvenated by moving her story into one of protecting Adrien from Gabe's machinations as best she can with the time she has left. A great example of that dynamic's the episode Safari. On top of that, her backstory is revealed to have been way more important to the family than had ever been shown before. Kinda smells like a retcon, if you ask me. But it was one that made her character way more compelling and fun to watch, so it was for the best once again. It added much needed depth to her character that she just didn't have when she was a besotted henchman. We get to learn about how she joined the family to help Gabe search for artifacts, specifically the Miraculouses, how this eventually turned into searching for cures for Emily's affliction, and how she'd clearly grown very close to them as a result. In that same season, we also see that Emily had left her a number of different video messages to serve as a sort of last testament on her wishes in regards to what goes on after she dies. In it, she tells Nathalie to look after Adrien and to do her best to get Gabe to move on and not become obsessed with trying to somehow bring her back to life. Obviously, she mostly fails at that and all her goals, but hey, she's on the path of some sort of redemption. And since she's not the main protagonist, not even in the top 5 or 6 main protagonists to be honest, then there was no chance she was ever going to succeed anyway, so you can't hold that against her. During the London special, we learn that in the aftermath of Gabe's sacrifice and the end of the original Monarch crisis, that she and Marinette, who she knows is Ladybug now, team up to figure out what to do next and what to tell Adrien. Initially, she seems pretty adamant that they have to tell the truth, and she's going to own up to her part in everything and thus go to prison, probably for a significant amount of time. It's Marinette, though, that tells her no, because Adrien's going to need some sort of support structure around him going forward. After all, in just over a year, he's just lost both of his parents. That's not something you can just shrug off. Poor kid has a lot of trauma he's going to be dealing with. In the end, she just goes with it and they form their own little Adrien protection squad. Queen then showcases the bond she shares with Adrien even more as a kindly guardian, before it's turned into an adoptive mother type of situation where Adrien decides that she's the family he wants to stay with, not either set of grandparents whom he barely knows. They also go even further in trying to manufacture that long-standing bond between Adrien and Nathalie by having her be a positive figure in his life when he was young and Emily was still alive, giving him love and comfort whilst Gabe would shrug him off and ignore him. It really does feel like the writing sets all of this up to make her seem like a massively reformed character, right? She's gone through the dark tunnel of villainy and she's come out the other side with a fresh perspective, where once she was party to the abuse of Adrien by his own father, now she's his protector and maternal figure. She's going to get her hero arc, where she can be a support to Adrien and a figure in the background that understands the truth of everything and who Marinette can turn to for advice. Or so we thought. After all, recent events have somewhat thrown this all into doubt. During the course of episode 7, Toro De Piedra, from the get-go, Nathalie's acting differently to how she'd been portrayed in more recent episodes. When Marinette walks into her office to see her and talk about Adrien, she's pretty abrupt to her and instantly hangs up whatever call she'd been on previously. Already that seemed a little bit suspicious, doesn't it? But we keep on going. She continues to act very angsty towards Marinette in regards to the whole letting Adrien find out the truth thing, even though previously she'd been 100% on board with letting that happen in the London special. Seems like something's changed, right? Something shifted her perspective on everything that's going on. At the end of that episode, it's revealed that Nathalie's not quite the person we all thought. She's revealed to be reporting to some strange Illuminati type council that Gabe was previously a member of, with the big kicker being that she's now going to be working directly with Tomoe, aka the Machine, and then on top of that, she's expected to betray her in the end and get the Miraculous of the Ladybug and the Cat to her father instead. She seemingly accepts this mission, which leaves us as the audience wondering what the hell's going on here. Is she actually going to be a villain? Or is that going to be a somewhat elaborate ruse? I think there are probably 3 or 4 main directions the story could take to make this work. Some will be better than others. The first and the worst of these would be Nathalie simply being completely evil. A total all-out villain. Now, when I say the worst of these, I'm not talking about, oh no, this character's so evil, I can't wait to see how this impacts the story and the heroes. I more mean, oh look, what's that on the horizon? Ooh, a shit plot twist with a side of character assassination. This would be by far the least compelling direction to take the character, because it would make her actions in the previous seasons make no real sense. Why would she care if Gabe was wasting his time chasing Miraculouses and trying to convince him to spend more time with his son if all she wanted was the Miraculouses herself? Why would she bother bonding with Adrien at all? It would just suck, and I do think we can firmly rule this one out as a possibility. Don't get me wrong, I know that many of us have been burned in the past by the writing of Miraculous. Miracle Queen, I'm looking at you. But surely they wouldn't do this, right? Right? Season 3's just given us trust issues. Well, so did the end of Season 5, to tell you the truth. We'll call this terrible scenario the Devil Nathalie path. The next option, and one that I think is also massively unlikely as it spoils a big potential twist and removes a lot of tension, drama, and mystery from the season, is that she quickly informs Marinette of what's going on, and they work together to dismantle the organisation. It sounds boring because it would be boring. Too clear-cut, too dull. The Angel Nathalie path would just be lame, and we all know it. With those 2 weaker ideas out of the way, there are 2 more pathways I think the narrative is going to follow, potentially. The first one we'll talk about is the reluctant villain path, where she feels as if she has no choice but to work with the organisation, and will eventually need to betray Marinette, or may try to hinder her across the season, laying traps and concocting schemes, whilst also seeming like Adrien's protective parent. Of course, she doesn't know that Adrien is Cat Noir, and thus I think that would be the pathway from a villain to a redemption arc. We've seen numerous times what would happen if Gabe discovered that Adrien had the Cat Miraculous. He'd target him, akumatize him, and use him as a weapon against Ladybug to finally get his wish. He really just was the worst, wasn't he? Would Nathalie do that though? I don't think so. I think that discovery would cause her to change perspective and kickstart a redemption. After all, despite the wish being her last chance to survive in Season 5, she was far more focused on trying to protect Adrien and screw with Gabe. Although that being said, there was that one time she intended to use her Safari power to get the Miraculouses and betray Gabe at the same time. What do you reckon she'd do with him? Give the Miraculouses to her dad? Or would she want to use a wish of her own? I think it would be far more compelling if she's trying to get them to get a wish for Adrien, to protect him from something, rather than having her goals align with the perfect world scenario. Hell, maybe she wants to use the Miraculouses to take out the Illuminati completely and remove them as a threat forever. Maybe she'd want to turn Adrien into a real boy and prevent him being destroyed if that ring ever gets damaged. Regardless, I kind of like the idea of adding yet another faction into the mix. The Miraculous and the Guardians as one, Hawkmoth on the other, the Illuminati and then Nathalie. Hell, maybe even chuck in the Supreme if you want to play with multiversal shenanigans. It just opens up a lot of story potential and also angst and drama. That being said, I don't think that's how I'd want it to go. Even with the redemption, it feels like it somewhat walks back a lot of her development over Season 5 and makes her look like a massive hypocrite in the end. I think the only way you could make this work is if she works with them very reluctantly, as they're threatening to spill Gabe's secrets, which would in turn affect Adrien's life in a negative way, with her wanting to avoid that potential scenario. No, instead, I think the way I'd want to go is to have her always be intending to betray the organization, to try to protect Marinette, to try to preserve Adrien's happiness. Like I said earlier, she doesn't know that Adrien's cat noir. That's a pretty tightly guarded secret after all. Thus, her main goal would be to sabotage and bring them down from the inside, with the caveat of not involving Ladybug, because she's trying to keep them out of it to protect them. In the child/teen adventure genre, the idea of adults keeping secrets from the capable teenage/young adult protagonist is tried and tested. They only learn bits and pieces as they're deemed necessary. Think like Dumbledore from Harry Potter. Think about the gods and whatnot and how they interact with Percy Jackson and his demigod friends. The young protagonist is continually deemed unready to face the threat, and so the adults will handle things because the adults think they know best, and then ultimately fail, leaving our hero kind of underprepared for what they have to do, and increasing their struggle. I think that might be a plan of how to do things. That they have Nathalie try to keep Marinette out of the loop and go it alone, only to end up failing and being forced to ask for help, or have help forced upon her. In the end, whatever they do, I don't think it's going to be some long-term villain arc for Nathalie. It would be too samey for Adrien's Guardian to once again be a secret villain. Like, what's next? Is Gorilla going to be revealed to be Thanos in disguise, planning his universe-wide genocide as we speak? I think whatever way they go, it's going to be over pretty quick and she's going to remain as Adrien's mother figure. Otherwise, I think this would be egregious character assassination, and that would be a shame. Of course, all of these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of this Nathalie storyline? How do you think it's going to play out long-term? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.